Stapleton in Birmingham.
Hello. Nobody can have missed the story of the Bishop of Galway's confession last week that he's the father of a 17-year-old American boy after a secret affair with a woman called Annie Murphy. The scandal has highlighted the dilemma of whether priests should be allowed to marry. Good morning, the time is 10 o'clock and the place is Birmingham. The scandal over the bishop's love child has fueled the debate on several key questions. Should priests be celibate in 1992? And wouldn't we have more faith in them if they were more like us and were allowed to marry? We want you at home to take part in this debate by voting on the following question. Should priests be allowed to marry? If you think yes, they should, you should call this number. It's 0891 234 300. That's 0891 234 300 if you think priests should be allowed to marry. If you think they should not be allowed to marry, ring a slightly different number. That's 0891 234 301. 0891 234 301 if you think priests should not be allowed to marry. And I'll be giving you the results later in the programme. But first, take a look at this.
I'd have preferred to be a married priest, but since that option is not open to me, I'll have to settle for being married and not a priest.
Take some time to think.
I have thought, thanks. I'll see myself now.
Moving stuff. Well, that, of course, was a clip from Brookside on Channel 4, which over the last few months has had a storyline involving Father Derek here and Margaret. Storyline which involved Father Derek falling in love with Margaret, going through the torment of all that involved, knowing that according to the Catholic Church he couldn't marry her, and finally saying to the bishop there, "Right, sir, I want out." What sort of response has this fueled from the viewers?
Well, in the first place, it was slightly nervous. People were writing saying, this doesn't happen, and the last few weeks, that sort of dried up in a way. It's become very sympathetic towards both Derek and Margaret.
Really? People have actually, the opinions have shifted a bit?
Yeah.
Yeah. And they're now, what sort of letters are you getting? What sort of things do they say?
Well, I think people are sort of quite pleased with the storyline now. The majority of people that are writing, like with my character in particular, sometimes maybe we'll get letters that sort of paint her as quite a scarlet woman and she's after the forbidden fruit, etc. But we've sort of tried to sort of repel against that by making her a very sympathetic character, and she's really likeable. Both the characters are really likeable people, so that the audience can't blame either of them, can't blame the woman, or can't blame him for going against his religion, but can only blame the church.
We've taken time to show just a conventional couple, and that not have a sordid relationship and that a cheap sort of relationship, just to have a natural conventional
to concentrate on the love rather than, you know, anything sordid.
Just to show why is this such a sin.
Has it made you think a bit?
Obviously, it makes you think, playing a priest, about your own faith and what you believe in. It's certainly also made me think about the whole way the Catholic Church operates and how it's ruled and how it tells people how to live their lives.
We'll have a bit more of that in a tick, but also, I mean, what about the other actors and on the cast? I mean, have they joined in this discussion?
Yeah, I mean, most of them are going to be involved as their characters, you know. It affects a lot of people on the close. Our storyline is going to affect a lot of other people's storylines, for example, the family I work for, and especially Derek's family, because we wanted to show the pressures that priests and the girls they marry receive off their families, because those are usually the most immense pressures that they receive.
It inspires, this subject inspires Mal Young, producer of Brookside, great passion, doesn't it?
The most passionate response I've ever seen to any issue-related subject we've covered. People at the beginning, when they read in the media that we were going to be doing this, were accusing me of being a Satanist, of trying to bring down the church single-handedly.
As a matter of public record, was that your plot?
No, I'd like to say now on live TV it wasn't.
No.
But
What religion are you, by the way?
Catholic.
You are?
And I felt very comfortable going into this, knowing that I've got a Catholic background. And my own family would soon tell me if I was getting it wrong. There's enough people in the local church who would tell me. But I've got these letters saying, tear-stained letters, saying you must stop this, and we're writing to our MP about it. I've got letters from the House of Commons over it. But as Clive mentioned, as they've seen the dilemmas that they've gone through and the pressures building up as we've gone through the story very slowly and carefully, those letters have changed. And some of the original people who've written to me last January have now written to me saying, I take it all back. I can see what's going on here. I can understand it. I'm sorry. So the sympathy and the power of feeling has changed, turned right round.
You are traditionally top of the pops in Channel 4 ratings. You have millions of people watch you every week. It would appear, from what he says, you are influencing opinion. Does that bother you?
Well, I think we're bringing it into the public debate. We're not influencing opinion. We're making people aware of the facts.
I mean, I don't think it'd be nice to think that priests who are having an affair could watch our programme and then go out and go, right, I'm gonna announce this. But I don't think it actually works that way. But it's nice to know that we are bringing it to the attention of other people.
I think we should avoid trying to moralise on it, on any issue. Say, this is good for you, this is bad.
That's
I mean, I was very careful with the casting of the bishop, for example, the more traditional priest who Derek talked to in the early days of the story, to make sure that they were sympathetic characters and that we could hear their point of view. It would be very easy just to say, he's right and the church is wrong.
You're just throwing the thing up for debate, which is what we're doing today.
Yeah.
Which is fair enough. And coincidentally, of course, while this has been running for the last 2 months, latterly, in the latter stage of this, there's been a real life drama we all know about, the Bishop of Galway, the confession that he had this affair with this American lady and is the father of her boy. Hands up the people in the audience who were shocked or dismayed by those revelations. You were shocked. Why were you shocked?
I was more shocked, really, from the fact that he'd hidden it for 17 years.
That what?
He'd hidden it for 17 years.
It was the secrecy.
Yeah.
It was the cover-up.
And also how high ranking he got.
Now, interesting point. You were shocked that a bishop would do this. Would you have been shocked that a priest had done this?
No, I don't know what I mean.
I wonder why you make that distinction.
I suppose we just hold up our bishops a bit higher than the priests.
Are you a Catholic?
Yes.
You are. What's it done to your belief, if anything?
It's not shaken my belief. It's just made me feel a bit disappointed, really, for both parties.
Anybody else who would... Yes, lady there.
I wasn't shocked or dismayed, but I was upset and some disappointment. But then again, everybody's human and everyone can make mistakes. Like the gentleman down there said, 17 years to hide it is a long time.
Were you like him a bit more upset by the apparent duplicity? I mean, the cover-up?
Well, it's shocked, disappointed, hurting the church, hurting God. Now, we all hurt God every day in some way or other. But like he said, being a bishop, it's even more painful than maybe a priest.
Anybody else?
Even that is hurtful to the church.
Right.
I followed this lady's argument as well, but just listen to this. In the 4th century, this is St. Augustine, who was a bit of a lad before he was a bishop.
We'll live and learn on this show.
He had an illegitimate son before he was a bishop, and this is before his deep conversion. And he knew all about the human psychic and the difficulties that human beings have. This is what he said: "For you I am a bishop, with you I am a Christian. The former, that's the bishop, is a title of office which has been undertaken. The latter is a title of grace, that's a Christian. The first, that's the title of a bishop, is a danger, and the second is salvation." So he was quite aware of the dangers of being a bishop. You're not superhuman. But I agree with the lady, it hurts the church.
It hurt you, did it?
It hurt me for the church and for the bishop and for the child concerned and the lady herself as well. I think it deeply rocked some of the foundations of the church, because it is a pivotal point in which I think I can see from now on that it may be a dividing line between those who are for the Pope and the traditions of the church and those that are going to say no to the Holy Father and the traditions of the church. And if they do, it won't be the Catholic Church.
Okay.
The Catholic Church will be a small remnant.
So we're talking about a big issue. Let me introduce you all to two people here who've some experience, and I stress the some experience, of what Bishop of Galway went through. This is Alex and Jan. Alex was a priest for 8 years and fell in love with Jan. And as a result of their experience, they've been advising and chatting to these two about the part they play in Brookside and giving them some tips. But tell us first of all how you fell in love.
I was a priest in Kendal, and I met Jan when I first came to the parish in 1984. And I suppose, like any relationship, you know, friendships develop and grow, and until it comes to a point where that relationship develops in such a way that you end up having to make a decision about whether or not you can carry on living out the life of a priest, because there was the dilemma there that my affections were kind of drawn in two directions, and the church doesn't allow me to have a wife and to carry on ministering as a priest. Now,
He says, quite lightly in a way, you come to a point where you have to make a decision. You must have gone through the two of you must have gone through 2 years of considerable torment, mental torment.
It was real hell.
Because you're a Catholic too.
Yes, I am. When we realised how far our relationship was going, we were both in love, but none of us knew that we were both in love because we couldn't tell each other. We felt we couldn't tell each other because I didn't want him to sort of think, you know, to be frightened of how I felt about him. He the same about me. I even tried going out with other people. Then when we did finally agree to the way we felt about each other, we decided not to see each other, to separate.
Hang on a minute, who broke the ice? Who did the first confessional, as it were?
I did. Because your integrity as a priest is being undermined. I mean, the Bishop of Galway has a child. I mean, I don't know how he lived with himself for 17 years in that context. I certainly couldn't do it. I had difficulties concealing the fact that my affections for Jan were such that I was led to have to make a decision between the priesthood or between a long-term relationship with Jan.
So you've two things running. You've the love for Jan, which is in itself a worry because you're not supposed to do it, and,
yes.
and the cover-up.
Right, yes. I mean, there is deception there, and that's something that, you know, unless you're in that situation and people understand how the priesthood works and how you are as a Catholic and a Christian, then you don't want to lead a double life. You don't want that deception. It eats away at the very heart of you.
And the fact that you both decided to go your separate ways for a while suggests to me that you, as a Catholic, were saying, I have a burden of responsibility here too, and I don't want to lure him down this forbidden path. Yes? Is that right?
Yes, that's right. People ask me, how did I feel about sinning? Well, the only sin I can really say I've done is to fall in love. And I think no matter whether you're a priest or not, it's not a sin to fall in love. You don't do it on purpose. You don't pick somebody and say, I'm going to fall in love with that person. And the relationship grows within, you know.
And it also takes two. I mean, I would hate the burden of guilt to rest on Jan, or indeed any other woman that's involved with the priest at the moment. I mean, you know, priests themselves can be, you know, the leaders in all of this, not simply the women.
What did the church say when you went to tell them this?
Well, I went to see my bishop and just explain the situation to him. I mean, again, he would, as you know, in the storyline, the bishop would reiterate the virtues of celibacy. I understand the virtues of celibacy, and the principles of it are excellent, and I tried to live it out as best I could for 8 years. But the burden of living out a celibate life, which I knew wasn't right for me, I wanted to be a priest first and foremost. I took on celibacy as part of the package deal of priesthood, but I knew that for me personally it would always be a struggle, and it was a struggle eventually that I had to say, enough's enough, I'm being dehumanised, I'm not fully alive, I'm only half alive, I'm not the person that God wants me to be. And I think in the Bishop Casey and the Brookside storyline, I don't believe in fate. As a Christian, I believe in providence. And the whole of this has come about so that the church can face this issue openly, honestly and squarely and with maturity, because that's what it demands at the moment.
It's not just the people either, it's not just the two of us that are concerned, that are part of all this. It's the families, it's the friends around.
John.
Father, can I just have a word with the father? Why shouldn't people like Alex and Jan be allowed to marry if they wish to be married and stay priests, or in his case, stay a priest?
Oh, well, I mean, why shouldn't they, I suppose? I mean, I don't want to get involved in a way in defending a total ban on married priests, because we've got married priests already in the Catholic Church, yeah? Okay. Well, the Uniate churches as well that we're linked with, but also in this country, one or two ex-Anglican vicars who've become Catholics, and they've been, as it were, ordained and practiced. So there is already within Catholicism a certain number of married priests. Obviously, from the Church's point of view, the case here would be someone who's committed themselves to a life, in this case a life of celibate service to the Church, has in a sense gone back on that commitment. Now I realise there are wider human questions there, and you've brought some of them up, you know, about the nature of falling in love and so on. But if I could come in on that, though, my sort of experience of coming to priesthood was slightly different, because I didn't, as it were, desperately want to be a priest, and then I sort of accepted celibacy because I had to. I grew up I was lucky, really. I grew up in a very stable environment here in Birmingham, of a warm sort of Catholic Christian home. And as a child, I used to go and serve at the local convent at Mass, you know, and I met lots and lots of priests there as a child who, and religious sisters who, they were so alive, you know, they were so full of life, that before I ever thought about what celibacy was, I saw it as a viable and, if you like, worthy form of life. And so as time went on, as I felt I wanted to follow Christ in a more radical way, priesthood seemed to me the most radical way I could. And I had to work through, like any other adolescent and young man, meeting young women who could have been Miss Right. And
you were tempted?
No, not tempted. No. Friendships and relationships are not temptations.
I only asked.
No, sorry, John, yeah. They're not temptations. They're part of the richness of life. You know, they're part of the richness of life. And those, they're still good friends, those young women and the women I've known since.
What I'm trying to ask you is this, and we'll come to some of our friends in a minute, is this. Do you honestly think that someone who is celibate, and it's a question, not a statement, do you honestly think that someone who is celibate can, in 1992, relate to his flock and their myriad of problems?
Yes, I do. I think that actually, when the celibacy is chosen freely, and this is one of the issues, of course, that will come up in this, but when it is chosen freely as a radical way of living, you live among people precisely for them in a very, very radical way. You live for them not because they're good-looking or intelligent or rich or talented. You live for them because of who they are.
Hang on. Who disagrees with that? Hands up. Somebody must disagree with it. You disagree with that, don't you?
Well, yeah, I suppose, you see, Anglicans, we get the best of both worlds in a way, because you can either be celibate, and we do have celibate clergy, and we've got married clergy. And I know when I was a lad of 14 when I decided I wanted to be a priest, but there was no way I could imagine myself being a single guy. And I think what David here is saying is that celibacy is a good thing, and here to that, and to the sister at the top, but I want to argue for the fact that it should be voluntary. And I have obviously worked with a lot of Catholic clergy. I can remember one clergy house in Liverpool, 3 priests, great mates of mine. And to walk into that clergy house, one was definitely, because he didn't have kids, was suffering from permanent bereavement. The second one was just girl mad. and actually, like Alec, went off and got married. And the third one made such a fuss of all his nieces and nephews, and I mean real nieces and nephews, not medieval nieces and nephews. And it was really quite sad.
You were training to be a priest, and that's the correct description.
Yes.
6 years this training lasts.
That's correct, yes.
During which, at any time, you can quit.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Do you think it reasonable of the Roman Catholic Church to say to you, 2 chaps, that for the next X number of years, for the rest of your life,
Yes,
you shall be celibate?
undoubtedly. And the reason being that my love of God and of his church and of his priesthood is of the same intensity as, say, of any young man who's about to marry the girl of his choice. He is going to make a commitment to be with that woman for the rest of his life. And just as it would be unusual to ask somebody about to embark upon marriage whether or not what they would do in 10 years' time would they think of divorce. So for myself as well, it would be not unquestionable, but it would be unusual to me to doubt a lifelong commitment.
But if he, sir, if he can fulfil his religious duties and love God and do all that is required of him, of his church, and be the father of kids as well, why can't you?
Because I've chosen not to. I think that the issue seems to be here that priests have to get married. And I think I can feel for the couple over there, but I don't think it's one of these things that you can make compulsory. I think I've opted for a single life. My life experience before I was at college was for a single life. Not that I haven't had relationships, but I've opted for a single life because of who I am.
We'll go to a break in a tick, but a
I
couple
think
of
the
books
issue is perhaps to define love as love is meant in the religious and in the Christian sense. It's entirely different to love in the secular sense. We're in a secular world, and so in lots of cases, love is equated with sex, but not always, but with the emotions. Now, in the Christian sense, love has little to do with the emotions. It's based on who Jesus Christ is. He said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Jesus is love. God is love. And it's based on how we are to love as God loves us. And that puts a different perspective on things, because he loves unconditionally, and he loved us before when we were in sin. And so we are to follow his example. We're to follow the example of Jesus. He didn't marry as it happened. And so the Catholic Church has chosen to choose that way, the truth and the life of Jesus being unmarried.
Okay, before we go to the break, quick word from you, and then we'll go to the break.
But that's how somebody would love their wife, though, the way you were just saying, unconditionally. And for life, and through thick and thin, through sins and through good. That's how somebody loves their wife.
I do crisis counselling work, and I can see the grave difficulties between a dilemma in some cases where a priest is called out at midnight or on spec, as we are, as priests are, as sisters are. There's a great dilemma if your wife or husband was in the most awful difficulty and you had to decide, am I going out to somebody dying with cancer and so on? This might happen once or twice, and it's easy to make the decision, but the pressures are on a priest very much, and on a sister, if they were married, as they have been in the Anglican Church, and why sadly, and I'm not saying it with glee, but why sadly many of the Anglicans have separated because of this pressure on the family.
I'm going to pause you there because we've got to go to a break. We've got lots more hands up, and they will be invited to take part in just a couple of ticks when we come back, and we'll be talking to, amongst other people, Peter here, because Peter says that the cases like the Bishop of Galway case are merely the tip of the iceberg, that there are many more priests who, for all sorts of reasons, break their vows of celibacy, and we'll be finding out more about that in a couple of ticks. Welcome back. Let me remind you that you can take part in our phone vote as to whether or not Catholic priests should be allowed to marry. If you can't get through, keep trying. We have 7,000 lines at your disposal. I'm not joking. Peter, author of a book called Catholics and Sex, and subsequently researcher into this issue of whether or not priests...
And before as well.
Before, whether or not priests do remain celibate, can remain celibate, etc., etc. What have you found?
It's very difficult to come up with any statistics, basically, because this is an issue that is essentially hidden by the Catholic Church. It's not one that they want to acknowledge. A lot of the evidence is anecdotal, and a lot of the details are kind of swept under the carpet. In fact, Bishop Casey's problem really was that he was caught out in public. But in America, a Catholic psychologist in America called Richard Sipe did a survey over a number of years with priests who came to him with kind of psychological difficulties and all sorts of difficulties. And he estimated that 20% of American priests broke their vows at different times in their lives. So it's obviously, it's not just isolated cases. Bishop Casey isn't just the kind of one bad apple in the barrel. It's a much broader question. And I think the Catholic Church has got to address it, but at the moment, on an institutional level, is showing no signs at all of a willingness to do that.
What sort of vibes do you get from the women who've been involved?
Well, I think one of the interesting things about the Bishop Casey case was how Annie Murphy was shown. People in Ireland particularly kind of slated her as being some sort of evil, money-grabbing temptress. I mean, she looked very bitter, but frankly, I'd be bitter if I'd been treated like that. And if the problem of priests breaking their vows is kept hidden, the role of women in that situation is just not acknowledged at all. I mean, they may get some money from the bishop to kind of keep them quiet, but a Christian church should be sort of reaching out and helping them. There was one case that we found in Germany where a woman actually bore a priest's child. He abandoned her. The bishop sent his secretary along to see this woman, offered her money, and when she wouldn't take money because that wasn't what she wanted, as he left, he turned to her and said, "May guilt haunt you." Basically, it's the woman's fault. The women are temptresses, they're daughters of Eve, they lead priests astray. That's the sort of official view. And no one will acknowledge their grief and their pain and their difficulties.
As I understand it, you have had a relationship with a priest that could have become a
Yes.
sexual relationship but didn't.
No, it didn't. All the ingredients were certainly there. I can't speak for him, of course. They were certainly there on my side. I was very, very young at the time. And what disturbed me and eventually drove me almost to a nervous breakdown was the enormous sense of denial that was not only present in him as to what actually we were doing together so often, which was not sex, I hasten to add, but the enormous amount of denial in myself. I come from 300 years or more of Protestant priests who've married daughters and sisters of priests. It stopped very abruptly a generation before me, but I therefore identified as closely as he did with the taboo on this. I therefore felt my feelings were very, very wicked indeed, and I didn't want to contaminate him or with them. But the people around us felt that it was mutual. They couldn't, of course, approach him, but they certainly approached me, and they tried to make me confront it. My own age group, of sort of 19, 20-year-olds. I wouldn't confront it. I couldn't believe this could happen. And it didn't happen. But the fact that the ingredients were there, we sought out each other's company constantly. He eventually left the church and did marry, but many years later, shows, I think, that these relationships do happen often on what is supposed to be a platonic level. It may not get any further than that, but the emotions are certainly stirred.
Right.
And a lot of denial comes in, which is not good for either party.
The piece of paper I was just handed, thank you for telling us about that. The piece of paper I've just been handed gives me the results of our Gallup, our phone poll at the moment. Should priests be allowed to marry was the question we asked. And so far, 14,595 of you have rung in to say, yes, they should be allowed to marry. And just 1,723 have said, no, they should not, Father. Now, I have to say, on the basis of that, which is, you know, the best guide we have at the moment, it is not only impractical to ask priests to be celibate, but you're swimming against a tide of current public opinion.
I think we're say something? I think the argument here isn't, I mean, we're not saying that celibacy isn't a good thing in itself.
Well, you aren't.
I'm not.
No.
There are priests who live the celibate life and live it fruitfully, and they do a very good job as celibate men, as they do in the Protestant tradition. But all we're asking for is that there is an optional celibacy. That there can be a choice between whether or not you're celibate or whether you're married.
Hang on, but there are other people, I think, saying a bit more. You, madam.
Celibacy, is it going to make you more respected than a
Yes.
priest who...
Is it? Yeah. Let's just have a few questions with you. Yes, sir.
Why more Liverpool?
Sorry.
Gentleman there is a theology student.
I'd like to, ex-theology student, I'd like to quote a very quick passage from...
Well, very quick, because we're nearly
very
the programme, please.
From a book by David Rice called Shattered Vows, and he quotes basically from Scripture where St. Paul says, while regarding celibacy as superior, left it as a free choice. Concerning celibacy, I have no commandment of the Lord, 1 Corinthians 25:40, insisting merely that ministers be the husband of one wife. Now, that is pretty fundamental.
Lady on the back.
Yeah, I think that, you know, a lot of people are talking about what they think, but it's very important what God sees is right, you know, and it's just as the guy said that in Corinthians it talks about, you know, Paul gives an option, and I think that if we're serving God, you know, we need to be following the Bible, and we raise priests to a certain level, and if we're serving God, we're on equal level, so they're not special people, you know, they're
Quick
just
word,
serving
then we'll give
God.
the last word to Father.
Well, God's law is that a man marries a woman, and I believe a priest, in effect, is a human being, and I believe he has as much right to marry as anybody else.
Yeah. Well, yeah, celibacy is actually all about a labour force that can be mobile, and secondly, it's much cheaper to keep a priest on his own in a clergy house than it is with a wife and 3 kids.
All right. That actually, you see, I have to say to you, I read in a paper yesterday, I may not be right, the original reason this was brought in, this celibacy law, was so that the children of the priest couldn't inherit the church property. It was nothing to do with great moral high ground. Anyway,
well, the law...
just address yourself to those figures. Are you out of step? Not your fault,
yes,
I know, but I mean...
Yes, we are out of step. We are out of step.
There might be Protestants who've rung in the 14,000.
Give him a chance, give him a chance.
We are out of step if you in terms of public opinion. But if you like, the celibacy lifestyle as a viable lifestyle is important for us as Catholic Christians because it bears witness to, if you like, the depths of loneliness in each one of us are not satisfied by any particular relationship, however wonderful your marriage might be or any other relationship you might have. That there is a loneliness in every human person that only an ultimate response can satisfy. And we're meant, in a sense, to live that as a question mark.
I've got to say, thank you. I've got to say bye-bye. See you same time, different place tomorrow. But you want to come in. We've got time. Go on.
Yes, these figures are a sign of the times in the Roman Catholic Church. The people who belong to the Roman Catholic Church are not praying. They are neglecting Jesus, the God who made them, who gave them the gifts and the blessings, and he is asking them to ask him to come to them.
And
this
so
is what's
is Our
missing.
Lady.
Yes,
She's
Jesus
been
and his mother
overlooked
is
and
appearing
ignored.
here for 11 years
Yes,
in
the devil
Yugoslavia.
is working in the church, and people aren't
And this is
I came